Hi everybody, welcome back to Yehusha's Glory. We are in the book of Jasher. Last time we were together we were talking about how Abram went to see King Nimrod. He just busted up his father's false idols with a hatchet and then tried to tell his dad, Tarak, that the biggest of the idols that he had built with stone or wood had busted the rest of them up because the little ones tried to eat before the big one got a chance to eat the meat offering he had brought them. Then his dad, Tarak, takes him to Nimrod, the king, and he goes and throws him in, gets ready to throw him in prison. There was a part right here that shows us what's about to happen. We're going to pick it up right now on page 320, and we're in chapter 12, book of Jasher, in the Sefer. And we start with... And when the king heard the words of Abram, he ordered him to be put into prison, and Abram was 10 days in prison. And at the end of those days the king ordered that all the kings, princes, and governors of different provinces and the sages should come before him. And they sat before him, and Abram was still in the house of confinement. And the king said to the princes and sages, "Have you heard that Abram the son of Tarak? Have you heard what Abram the son of Tarak has done to his father? Thus has he done to him, and I ordered him to be brought before me, and thus has he spoken. His heart did not misgive him, neither did he stir in my presence. And behold, now he is confined in the prison. And therefore decide what judgment is due to this man who reviled the king, who spoke and did all the things that you heard." And they all answered the king, saying, "The man who reviles the king should be hanged upon a tree. But having done all the things that he said, and having despised our Elohim, small e, he must therefore be burned to death. For this is the law in this matter. If it pleases the king to do this, let him order his servants to kindle a fire both night and day in your brick furnace, and then we will cast this man into it." And the king did so, and he commanded his servants that they should prepare a fire for 3 days and 3 nights in the king's furnace, that is in Kasdim. And the king ordered them to take Abram from prison and bring him out to be burned. And all the king's servants, princes, lords, governors, and judges, and all the inhabitants of the land, about 900,000 men, stood opposite the furnace to see Abram. And all the women and little ones crowded upon the roofs and towers to see what was doing with Abram. And they all stood together at a distance, and there was not a man left that did not come on that day to behold the scene. And when Abram was come, the conjurers of the king and the sages saw Abram, and they cried out to the king, saying, "Our sovereign lord, surely this is the man whom we know to have been the child, at whose birth the great star swallowed the 4 stars, which we declared to the king now 50 years since. And behold, now his father has also transgressed your commands, and mocked you by bringing you another child, which you did kill." And when the king heard their words, he was exceedingly wroth. And he ordered, and if you guys don't understand what's going on here, when Abram was born, he was to be killed. And back a little bit earlier in the Jasher studies, they brought him a child of one of the servants, and then the king killed that child, because I believe he's supposed to depose King Nimrod. And so it is. And the king said, verse 12, page 320, Jasher, Sefer. And the king said, "Have you heard what the conjurers have spoken? Now tell me truly, how did you? And if you shall speak truth, you shall be acquitted." And seeing that the king's anger was so much kindled, Tarak said to the king, "My lord and king, you have heard the truth, and what the sages have spoken is right." And the king said, "How could you do this thing to transgress my orders, and to give me a child that you did not beget, and to take value for him?" Because he also received some money for him. And Tarak answered the king, "Because my tender feelings were excited for my son at that time. And I took a son of my handmaid, and I brought him to the king. And the king said, 'Who advised you to this? Tell me, do not hide aught from me. and then you shall not die. And Trak was greatly terrified in the king's presence, and he said to the king, It was Haran, my eldest son, who advised me to this. And Haran was in those days that Abram was born 32 years old. But Haran did not advise his father to anything, for Trak said this to the king in order to deliver his soul from the king, for he feared greatly. And the king said to Trak, Haran your son, who advised you to this, shall die through fire with Abram, for the sentence of fire is upon him for having rebelled against the king's desire in doing this thing. And Haran at that time felt inclined to follow the ways of Abram, but he kept it within himself. And Haran said in his heart, Behold, now the king has seized Abram on account of these things which Abram did, and it shall come to pass that if Abram prevail over the king, I will follow him, but if the king prevail, I will go after the king. And when Trak had spoken this to the king concerning Haran his son, the king ordered Haran to be seized with Abram. And they brought them for both, Abram and Haran his brother, to cast them into the fire, and all the inhabitants of the land, and the king's servants and princes, and the women and the little ones were there, standing that day over them. And the king's servants took Abram and his brother, and they stripped them of all their clothes, excepting their lower garments, which were upon them. And they bound their hands and feet with linen cords. And the servants of the king lifted them up and cast them both into the furnace. And Yahuwah loved Abram, and he had compassion over him. And Yahuwah came down and delivered Abram from the fire, and he was not burned. But all the cords with which they bound him were burned, while Abram remained and walked about in the fire. And Haran died when they cast him into the fire, and he was burned to ashes, for his heart was not perfect with Yahuwah. And those men who cast him into the fire, the flames of the fire spread over them, and they were burned, and 12 men of them died. And Abram walked in the midst of the fire 3 days and 3 nights, and all the servants of the king saw him walking in the fire, and they came and told the king, saying, Behold, we have seen Abram walking about in the midst of the fire, and even the lower garments which are upon him are not burned, but the cord with which he was bound is burned. And when the king heard their words, his heart fainted, and he would not believe them. So he sent other faithful princes to see this matter. And they went and saw it, and they told it to the king. And the king rose to go and see it, and he saw Abram walking to and fro in the midst of the fire. And he saw Haran's body burned, and the king wondered greatly. And the king ordered Abram to be taken out from the fire. And his servants approached to take him out, and they could not, for the fire was around about, and the flame ascended toward them from the furnace. And the king's servants fled from it. And the king rebuked them, saying, Make haste and bring Abram out of the fire, that you shall not die. And the servants of the king again approached to bring Abram out, and the flames came upon them and burned their faces, so 8 of them died. And when the king saw that his servants could not approach the fire, lest they should be burned, the king called to Abram, O servant of the Elohim, capital E, who is in heaven, go forth from amidst the fire, and come hither before me. And Abram hearkened to the voice of the king, and he went forth from the fire, and came and stood before the king. And when Abram came out, the king and all his servants saw Abram coming before the king with his lower garments upon him, for they were not burned, but the cord with which he was bound was burned. And the king said to Abram, How is it that you were not burned in the fire? And Abram said to the king, The Elohim of heaven and earth, in whom I trust, and who has all in his power, he delivered me from the fire into which you did cast me. And Haran the brother of Abram was burned to ashes, and they sought for his body, and they found it consumed. And Haran was 82 years old when he died in the fire of Kasdim. And the king, princes, and inhabitants of the land, seeing that Abram was delivered from the fire, they came and bowed down to Abram. And Abram said to them, Do not bow down to me, but bow down to the Elohim of the world, capital E, Elohim, who made you, and serve him and go in his ways. For it is he who delivered me from out of this fire, and it is he who created the souls and ruachat of all men, and formed man in his mother's womb, and brought him forth into the world. And it is he who will deliver those who trust in him from all pain. And this thing seemed very wonderful in the eyes of the king and princes, that Abram was saved from the fire and that Haran was burned. And the king gave Abram many presents, and he gave him his 2 head servants from the king's house. The name of one was Oni, and the name of the other was Eleazar. And all the king's princes and servants gave Abram many gifts of silver and gold and pearl. And the king and his princes sent him away, and he went in peace. And Abram went forth from the king in peace, and many of the king's servants followed him. And about 300 men joined him. And Abram returned on that day and went to his father's house, he and the men that followed him. And Abram served Yahuwah Elohahu all the days of his life, and he walked in his ways and followed his Torah. And from the day forward, Abram inclined the hearts of the sons of men to serve Yahuwah. And at that time, Nachor and Abram took unto themselves women, the daughters of their brother Haran. The woman of Nachor was Milcah, and the name of Abram's woman was Sarai. And Sarai, the woman of Abram, was barren. She had no offspring in those days. And at the expiration of 2 years from Abram's going out of the fire, that is, in the 52nd year of his life, behold, King Nimrod sat in Babel upon the throne, and the king fell asleep and dreamed that he was standing with his troops and hosts in a valley opposite the king's furnace. And he lifted up his eyes and saw a man in the likeness of Abram coming forth from the furnace, and that he came and stood before the king with his drawn sword, and then sprang to the king with his sword, when the king fled from the man, for he was afraid. And while he was running, the man threw an egg upon the king's head, and the egg became a great river, and the king dreamed that all his troops sank in that river and died. And the king took flight, and 3 men who were before him, and he escaped. And the king looked at these men, and they were clothed in princely dresses, as the garment of kings, and had the appearance of majesty of kings. And while they were running, the river again turned to an egg before the king, and there came forth from the egg a young bird, which came before the king, and flew at his head, and plucked out the king's eye. And the king was grieved at the sight, and he awoke out of his sleep, and his ruach was agitated, and he felt a great terror. And in the morning the king rose from his couch in fear, and he ordered all the wise men and magicians to come before him. When the king related his dream to them, and a wise servant of the king, whose name was Anuku, answered the king, saying, This is nothing else but the evil of Abram and his seed, which will spring up against my lord and king in the latter days. And behold, the day will come when Abram and his seed and the children of his household will war with my king, and they will smite all the king's hosts and his troops. And as to what you have said concerning 3 men which you did see, like unto yourself, and which did escape, this means that only you will escape with 3 kings from the kings of the earth, who will be with you in battle. And that which you saw of the river which turned to an egg, as at first, and the young bird plucking out your eye, this means nothing else but the seed of Abram, which will slay the king in the latter days. This is my king's dream, and this is its interpretation, and the dream is true, and the interpretation which your servant has given you is right. Now therefore, my king, surely you know that it is now 52 years since your sages saw this at the birth of Abram. And if my king will suffer Abram to live in the earth, it will be to the injury of my lord and king. For all the days that Abram lives, neither you nor your kingdom will be established. For this was known formerly at his birth. And why will not my king slay him, that his evil may be kept from you in latter days? And Nimrod hearkened to the voice of Anuku, and he sent some of his servants in secret to go and seize Abram and bring him before the king to suffer death. And Eleazar, Abram's servant, whom the king had given him, was at that time in the presence of the king. And he heard what Anuku advised the king, and what the king had said to cause Abram's death. And Eleazar said to Abram, Hasten, rise up and save your soul, that you may not die through the hands of the king. For thus did he see in a dream concerning you, and thus did Anuku interpret it, and thus also did Anuku advise the king concerning you. And Abram hearkened to the voice of Eliezer, and Abram hastened and ran for safety to the house of Noah and his son Shem, and he concealed himself there and found a place of safety. And the king's servants came to Abram's house to seek him, but they could not find him, and they searched throughout the country, and he was not to be found. And they went and searched in every direction, and he was not to be met with. And when the king's servants could not find Abram, they returned to the king. But the king's anger against Abram was stilled, and they did not find him, as they did not find him. And the king drove from his mind this matter concerning Abram, and Abram was concealed in Noah's house for 1 month, until the king had forgotten this matter. But Abram was still afraid of the king, and Terach came to see Abram his son, secretly in the house of Noah, and Terach was very great in the eyes of the king. And Abram said to his father, Do you not know that the king thinks to slay me, and to annihilate me, my name, from the earth, by the advice of his wicked counselors? Now whom have you here, and what have you in this land? Arise, let us go together to the land of Canaan, that we may be delivered from his hand, lest you perish also through him in the latter days. Do you not know, or have you not heard, that it is not through love that Nimrod gives you all this honor, but it is only for his benefit that he bestows all this good upon you? And if he do unto you greater good than this, surely these are only vanities of the world. For wealth and riches cannot avail in the day of wrath and anger. Now therefore hearken to my voice, and let us arise and go to the land of Canaan, out of the reach of entry from Nimrod, and serve Yahuwah, who created you in the earth, and it will be well with you. And cast away all the vain things which you pursue. And Abram ceased to speak, when Noah and his son Shem answered Terach, saying, True is the word which Abram has said to you. And Terach hearkened to the voice of his son Abram, and Terach did all that Abram said, for this was from Yahuwah, that the king should not cause Abram's death. A side note here, talking about what's about to happen. On Abram's account, Terach and all his house with Abram leave Ur-Kasdim to go to the land of Canaan. They tarry in Haran, where Yahuwah appears to Abram, and upon condition of faithfulness promises many blessings. Abram, commanded of Yahuwah, takes his woman and all belongings to him, and goes to the land of Canaan, where Yahuwah again appears to him and promises the land of Canaan as an everlasting inheritance. After 15 years, Abram returns to Haran to visit his father, teaches many to walk in the ways of Yahuwah, again commanded to go to Canaan, where he builds an altar. Yahuwah renews his covenant with him. So, chapter 13, page 323 in the Sefer. And Terach took his son Abram and his grandson Lot, the son of Haran, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, the woman of his son Abram, and all the souls of his household, and went with them from Ur-Kasdim to go to the land of Canaan. And when they came as far as the land of Haran, they remained there, for it was exceedingly good land for pasture, and of sufficient extent for those who accompanied them. And the people of the land of Haran saw that Abram was good and upright with Elohim and men, and that Yahuwah Eloahu was with him. And some of the people of the land of Haran came and joined Abram, and he taught them the instruction of Yahuwah and his ways. And these men remained with Abram in his house, and they adhered to him. And Abram remained in the land 3 years, and at the expiration of the 3 years Yahuwah appeared to Abram and said, I am Yahuwah, who brought you forth from Ur-Kasdim and delivered you from the hands of all your enemies. And now therefore, if you will hearken to my voice and guard my commandments, my statutes, and my Torah, then will I cause your enemies to fall before you, and I will multiply your seed like the stars of heaven, and I will send my blessing upon all the works of your hands, and you shall lack nothing. Arise now, take your woman and all belonging to you, and go to the land of Canaan, and remain there, and I will there be unto you for an Elohim, and I will bless you. And Abram rose and took his woman and all belonging to him, And he went to the land of Canaan as Yahuwah had told him. And Abram was 50 years old when he went from Haran. And Abram came to the land of Canaan and dwelt in the midst of the city. And he there pitched his tent amongst the children of Canaan, inhabitants of the land. And Yahuwah appeared to Abram when he came to the land of Canaan and said to him, This is the land which I gave unto you and to your seed after you forever. And I will make your seed like the stars of heaven, and I will give unto your seed for an inheritance all the lands which you see. And Abram built an altar in the place where Elohim had spoken to him, and Abram there called upon the name of Yahuwah. At that time, at the end of 3 years of Abram's dwelling in the land of Canaan, in that year Noah died, which was the 58th year of the life of Abram. And all the days that Noah lived were 950 years, and he died. And Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, he, his woman, and all belonging to him, and all those who accompanied him, together with those that joined him from the people of the land. But Nachor, Abram's brother, and Terach his father, and Lot, the son of Haran, and all belonging to them dwelt in Haran. In the 5th year of Abram's dwelling in the land of Canaan, the people of Sedom and Amorah, and all the cities of the plain, revolted from the power of Kedorlaomer, king of Elam. For all the kings of the cities of the plain had served Kedorlaomer for 12 years, and given him a yearly tax. But in those days, in the 13th year, they rebelled against him. And in the 10th year of Abram's dwelling in the land of Canaan, there was war between Nimrod, king of Shinar, and Kedorlaomer, king of Elam. And Nimrod came to fight with Kedorlaomer and to subdue him. For Kedorlaomer was at that time one of the princes of the hosts of Nimrod. And when all the people at the tower were dispersed, and those that remained were also scattered upon the face of the earth, Kedorlaomer went to the land of Elam and reigned over it and rebelled against his Lord. And in those days, when Nimrod saw that the cities of the plain had rebelled, he came with pride and anger to war with Kedorlaomer. And Nimrod assembled all his princes and subjects, about 700,000 men, and went against Kedorlaomer. And Kedorlaomer went out to meet him with 5,000 men. And they prepared for battle in the valley of Babel, which is between Elam and Shinar. And all those kings fought there, and Nimrod and his people were smitten before the people of Kedorlaomer, and there fell from Nimrod's men about 600,000, and Mardon, the king's son, fell among them. And Nimrod fled and returned in shame and disgraced to his land, and he was under subjection in Kedorlaomer for a long time. And Kedorlaomer returned to his land and sent princes of his host to the kings that dwelt around him, to Arioch, king of Elachar, and to Tidal, king of nations, and made a covenant with them, and they were all obedient to his commands. And it was in the 15th year of Abram's dwelling in the land of Canaan, which is the 70th year of the life of Abram. And Yahuwah appeared to Abram in that year, and he said to him, I am Yahuwah who brought you out from Ur-Kasdim to give you this land for an inheritance. Now therefore walk before me and be perfect and guard my commandments. For to you and to your seed I will give this land for an inheritance from the river Mitzrayim unto the great river Perath, and you shall come to your fathers in peace and in good age, and the 4th generation shall return here in this land and shall inherit it forever. And Abram built an altar, and he called upon the name of Yahuwah, who appeared to him, and he brought up sacrifices upon the altar to Yahuwah. At that time Abram returned and went to Haran to see his father and mother and his father's house. His father's household. And Abram and his woman and all belonging to him returned to Haran, and Abram dwelt in Haran 5 years. And many of the people of Haran, about 72 men, followed Abram, and Abram taught them the instruction of Yahuwah and his ways, and he taught them to know Yahuwah. In those days Yahuwah appeared to Abram in Haran, and he said to him, Behold, I spoke unto you these 20 years back, saying, Go forth from your land from your birthplace and from your father's house to the land which I have shown you, to give it to you and to your children, for there in that land I will bless you and make you a great nation, and make your name great. And in you shall the families of the earth be blessed. Now therefore arise, go forth from this place, you, your woman, and all belonging to you, also everyone born in your house, and all the souls you have made in Haran, and bring them out with you from here, and rise to return to the land of Canaan. And Abram arose and took his woman Sarai, and all belonging to him, and all that were born to him in his house, and the souls which they made in Haran. And they came out to go to the land of Canaan. And when Abram went and returned to the land of Canaan according to the word of Yahusha, and Abram went and returned. And Lot, the son of his brother Haran, went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he went forth from Haran to return to the land of Canaan. And he came to the land of Canaan according to the word of Yahusha to Abram. And he pitched his tent, and he dwelt in the place of Mamre. And with him was Lot his brother's son, and all belonging to him. And Yahusha again appeared to Abram and said, to your seed will I give this land. And he there built an altar to Yahusha, who appeared to him, which is still to this day in the plains of Mamre. And then the little side note here says, Rikaion's cunning device to make money of the Mitzrayim. Okay, we're going to cut it off right here. Before chapter 14 on page 324, I'm going to write next lesson, so I know where to pick up at. I'm glad you guys are listening. So, looks like Abram has gone to Canaan, like Father Yahusha told him, and then he went back home to where his father's from. And then at his 75 years old, he goes back to Canaan again. And there's a note down here on the page before that says Bereshith in Genesis. So in Genesis it states that Abram was 75 when he departed Haran. That must be referring to the second time he goes to Canaan. So here we have it. We're going to come back. Bless all of you in Yehusha's name. I'll make this quick. If you have any questions, leave them at the bottom of the page and in the comments below. And remember that I'm reading these word for word all through the book so that you can take this mobile if you want to, make a recording. Next time I come back, we'll be in the Sefer, chapter 14, page 324 of the book of Jasher. Talk to you soon. Take care. Thanks.